HOA illegally changed my locks. They didn't know I designed the entire security system. Who gives a homeowners association the right to break into your home when you're not even violating the rules? It all started with a blinking red light. I had just returned from a 3-day business trip to San Jose. As I stepped onto my porch, suitcase still in hand, I noticed the front door lock was different, bulkier. Metallic silver instead of the matte black biometric keypad I installed myself. My stomach dropped. I reached for the handle and nothing. Locked. My thumbprint didn't register because the whole system had been ripped out. I stood there dumbfounded, blinking at the unfamiliar keypad. Then the note caught my eye, taped to the door, written in cheap blue ink like it belonged on a third grader's homework. As per HOA emergency compliance protocol, we've replaced your non-standard lock. Please contact the board to receive your new access code. My blood boiled. Let me be clear. I designed the entire security system for this neighborhood. My firm was contracted to install biometric entry, encrypted gate controls, and internal surveillance for 5 blocks of West Ridge Heights. I personally built the original lock on my own home with military-grade encryption. And now some clipboard-toting, passive-aggressive HOA committee had decided it wasn't aesthetically compatible? I knew exactly who was behind this: Helen Ostro-Adams, or as everyone secretly called her, HOA Karen. Helen, the self-appointed queen of shrub trimming regulations and mailbox color coordination, had made my life difficult since day one. She once fined me $150 for excessively futuristic outdoor lighting. It was a motion-activated LED pathway. I called the HOA's emergency number, straight to voicemail. Then I called my neighbor Julio, who kept tabs on things while I was away. He picked up on the first ring. "Bro, are you okay?" he said. "They were here 2 days ago. For people. I thought you knew." "No one had my permission," I snapped. "They said it was an unauthorized modification." Karen marched up and pointed at your door, and next thing I know, a locksmith's drilling into your frame. I recorded some of it on my Ring cam. My throat tightened. "Can you send it to me?" A minute later, I was watching footage of Karen pointing at my house like a general sending troops into battle. Her voice was shrill even through the digital distortion. It sets a dangerous precedent, and regulation technology attracts crime. Then she pulled out a clipboard and smirked as the hired locksmith yanked wires from my system like it was an old toy. She had broken into my home. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed in a motel 2 miles away, laptop open, scanning the server logs from my cloud backup. And there it was: system breach, timestamped, location pinged, and a remote camera still active inside my breaker box. They didn't know I had redundant backups embedded behind the walls, invisible to casual inspection. The camera had caught everything. At 10:42 a.m. on the second day of my trip, Karen had entered my home without a warrant, without permission. With a smug smile and a Tupperware of gluten-free muffins she later handed to the locksmith as a thank you. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. This wasn't just overreach. It was a felony. The next morning, I walked into the HOA office, quiet, sterile, all neutral tones and laminated plaques. Karen was behind the desk, lips pursed, wearing a mauve blouse that matched her condescending tone. "Oh, you're back," she said, not even looking up. "You should have informed us about your absence. HOA policy requires notice if you're gone more than. You entered my house. I entered a structure violating compliance." Her words were slick like a politician's. "We had to take action to secure the neighborhood standard. Your lock was installed with city permits. HOA doesn't override that. And you have no right to destroy private property." She blinked slowly. "If you're unhappy, you may file an internal complaint." I slid a flash drive across the counter. "What's this?" "The footage of you trespassing. I've also sent it to my attorney. And Channel 9. Karen's face paled. But before she could open her mouth, the door behind me opened and in walked Detective Marla Granger, a close friend of mine from the precinct I used to consult for during my time in cybersecurity. I hadn't told Karen about her yet. "Ms. Adams," Granger said with a hard smile, "I believe we need to talk." Karen's carefully constructed smile shattered like a dropped porcelain cup. "I'm sorry, and who are you?" she asked, voice shaking slightly despite her effort to keep it firm. Detective Granger held up her badge. Detective Marla Granger, Cybercrime and Property Crimes Division. We've received a formal complaint of unlawful entry and destruction of private security infrastructure, both felonies under state law. Karen gave a dry, almost laugh-like scoff. Surely there's been some misunderstanding. This is a homeowners association matter, not a criminal one. We were acting within our community charter. That charter doesn't grant you the power to override state property laws, Marla said evenly. And from what I've seen on this footage, she held up a tablet with the paused image of Karen entering the house. You authorized and participated in the forced entry of a private residence without consent, cause, or emergency. For the first time, Karen didn't speak. I could see her eyes darting around, searching for support. But no one came to her rescue. I'm going to need you to come with me for questioning, Granger added. Now. Karen's lips parted as if to object, but her voice betrayed her thin, cracked. I need to call the HOA's legal representative. You'll have that opportunity after booking, Marla replied. As the detective gently guided Karen out, I turned to see the HOA secretary Marlene, a sweet older woman who had always baked cookies for board meetings, staring at me with wide eyes. I didn't know she'd go that far, she whispered. We all thought it was just about aesthetics. She went into my house, I said, voice heavy. That's not aesthetics. That's control. Outside, Karen was escorted into the back of the squad car. Neighbors began to gather. Julio had apparently sent the footage to the neighborhood group chat, and several residents tired of Karen's reign stood by in stunned silence, watching the so-called HOA queen get driven away. But that wasn't the end. Later that week, I was contacted by Daniel Wu, a retired systems engineer and longtime HOA board member. He asked if we could talk, and we met at a neutral spot, his garage, which doubled as a kind of amateur robotics lab. First, he said, offering a chair, let me say I'm sorry. I should have stepped in sooner. You knew what she was doing? Not exactly, but I knew she was manipulating the bylaws. For months she's been pushing through emergency resolutions and convincing board members that certain technologies were dangerous. She even tried to ban solar panels last year, claimed the glare could cause community disorientation. I almost laughed. Almost. Why did no one stop her? I asked. Daniel hesitated, then shrugged. She steamrolled everyone. Most people were too tired to fight. And the truth is, she was charismatic, a tyrannical kind of way. Then he pulled out a manila folder. Inside were copies of emails, voice memos, and meeting transcripts records that showed Karen had been pressuring contractors, bribing junior board members with favors, even threatening a retired couple with fines unless they supported her motions. This isn't just a rogue HOA president, Daniel said. It's a hostile takeover of an entire neighborhood's autonomy. We contacted a lawyer, and a week later we filed a class action suit on behalf of 23 households. It turned out Karen had been exploiting her role to impose fines, approve illegal surveillance on neighbors, and authorize property invasions, all under the guise of maintaining standards. Her downfall came fast. Channel 9 aired a story titled The HOA Tyrant of West Ridge Heights, using footage from the hidden camera inside my breaker panel. Local news picked it up. Then it went national. Karen's reputation crumbled overnight. But the twist? Just when I thought we'd hit the final blow, a new character entered the scene. Lindsay Ostro, Karen's estranged daughter. She contacted me through Facebook. Her message was short. You don't know me, but I need to speak with you. I've been waiting for someone to expose her. She's done this before. I met her at a coffee shop 2 towns over. She looked nothing like her mother, sincere, soft-spoken, nervous. My mom used to be a principal, she explained. Private school. Ran it like a dictatorship. She got pushed out after forcing families out with made-up academic violations. And before that, she was the head of a neighborhood watch program in Florida. Same story. She pulled out a small USB drive. These are her old HOA proposals from other towns. Same patterns. Same rules. Same non-compliant violations. She just moves, reinvents, and starts over. My heart dropped. Karen wasn't just a controlling neighbor. She was a serial manipulator, bouncing from community to community like a virus, using policy as a weapon. "This isn't about you," Lindsay said gently. "She needs control. It's the only way she feels powerful." The insight was chilling and strangely sad. But it didn't excuse anything. And the best part? The entire HOA was dissolved. The neighborhood voted to replace it with a community-led collective, transparent, volunteer-based, and without authoritarian leadership. Karen lost her home, her position, and her reputation. Her remaining allies? Silent. Many distanced themselves overnight. I went back to my house a month later, walking through the same door she had once destroyed. Only now, the lock had been restored exactly as I designed it. Inside, I paused, looking at the blinking green light. Safe. Secure. Mine. I thought that was the end of it. That Karen was gone for good. A cautionary tale to be whispered about at barbecues and book clubs. But as with all things involving her, nothing was ever that simple. One rainy afternoon, nearly 2 months after the lawsuit closed, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single typed page. "I hope you're proud. You humiliated me. You think you're a hero? You stole my community. You stole my identity. But you can't erase me. People like me always come back." It wasn't signed. But I knew the tone. It was her. I immediately forwarded the letter to Detective Granger and Lindsay. The police couldn't do much. It wasn't an explicit threat, but it was enough to raise concern. Granger flagged it for future reference. Lindsay just sighed. "She doesn't know how to live without control," she said. "Now she's spiraling." But I refused to live in fear. I upgraded the entire surveillance system in my home, layered entry logs, AI monitoring alerts, encrypted backups on triple redundant servers. If she so much as stepped onto my property, the system would know before I did. I moved on, or at least I tried to. Then came the garden incident. Started small. My front lawn, once perfectly manicured, began to show signs of disturbance. Garden lights unplugged. Shrubs trimmed in odd shapes. A patch of my newly planted succulents had been torn up and replaced with plain grass sod, HOA standard issue. At first, I thought it was neighborhood kids or a raccoon. But the patterns were too precise. Too intentional. Then one morning, I walked outside to find a wooden stake driven into my front yard. Attached to it was a small sign, written in Sharpie. "This is not your land to deface. Standards must be upheld." My hands clenched. My mind raced. I pulled the surveillance logs, and there she was. Karen, in a hoodie, face half covered by a scarf, tiptoeing through my lawn at 2:43 a.m. Still bold. Still deluded. That was the final straw. This time, I didn't go to the police first. I went to the entire neighborhood. Julio helped me organize a community gathering. We set up chairs on his lawn, invited everyone via email, and displayed the new footage on a projection screen. It was the first time many neighbors had seen the post-lawsuit Karen in action, covert, bitter, obsessed. Shock turned to anger, then resolve. Lindsay, who had agreed to attend, stepped forward and did something I never expected. She stood before the group, eyes glistening, and said, "My mother's illness isn't yours to excuse, but I won't let her keep hurting people. She needs help. But more than that, this community needs healing. And healing starts with truth." Her voice didn't waver. Not once. The room fell silent. For a moment, even the crickets outside stopped. Then someone clapped. Then another. And soon, the entire lawn echoed with the sound of people choosing unity over fear. We decided, together, to place a no trespassing injunction against Karen. The entire street signed it. Every home. Every neighbor she had once manipulated. It wasn't just a legal boundary. It was symbolic. Karen had lost her final foothold. The authorities issued a court-mandated psychological evaluation after she violated the restraining order again by mailing artificial grass samples to half the street in unlabeled envelopes. They found signs of deep-seated control disorders and narcissistic delusions. She was placed in supervised care for mental rehabilitation. I didn't rejoice. I didn't mock her. But I felt peace. For the first time since moving to West Ridge Heights, I felt like the place was truly mine. Not just my house, but my home. My neighbors, once isolated by fear and passive rules, had become allies, even friends. And in the strangest twist of fate, I found myself running for a new leadership role, not in another HOA but in the Community Development Council. Transparent, fair, voluntary, everything Karen never was. I didn't seek revenge. I sought restoration, and that, I realized, was the true counter to control empowerment. Months passed. The neighborhood looked different, not in structure, but in spirit. What was once a grid of cold, quiet, fearful homes now buzzed with weekend potlucks, kids riding scooters without someone yelling about driveway decorum, and neighbors talking, not whispering. The old fear was gone. I remember one late Sunday afternoon. I was sitting on my porch with a glass of lemonade, watching the sky soften into gold, when Julio strolled over with a grin. "Hey, you see the news?" I raised an eyebrow. "What now?" He pulled out his phone and showed me an article. Ex-HOA president sued in second state over alleged abuse of authority, pattern of manipulation across communities uncovered. Karen had been linked to 2 more neighborhoods. One in Arizona, another in Colorado. In both places, residents came forward after seeing our story online. Turns out, she'd used variations of her name and appearance, but the behavior was the same. Control through bureaucracy, coercion masked as compliance. The piece quoted one of her old victims. She weaponized rules to break people. It was never about order, it was about power. I didn't know how to feel. A part of me wanted to feel vindicated. But the truth was I felt sad. Not for what she'd done to me, but for how someone could let their need to dominate become their only identity. And that's when I decided to finish what I'd started. Using my experience in cybersecurity and civic infrastructure, I began working with local governments to reform HOA accountability laws. I wasn't trying to eliminate HOAs, but to ensure transparency, limit power abuse, and give residents a fair voice. With the help of our new community council, we launched Project Clear Door, a local initiative focused on transparent HOA documentation, regular audits of board power and decisions, anonymous complaint systems for residents, mental health checks and balance systems for leadership roles. We weren't just reacting anymore. We were building, and people noticed. A few months into the project, a journalist from a regional newspaper reached out. She asked if she could do a follow-up piece about the lock incident. I agreed, but on one condition. "I don't want the story to be about Karen," I said. "I want it to be about us, what we built after." She smiled and said, "That's the first time someone's asked me that." So she came, interviewed me, interviewed Julio, talked to Lindsay. Even Marlene, the once silent HOA secretary, spoke out. When the article went live, the headline wasn't about scandal. It read, "After the locks were changed, so was the neighborhood." I printed it out and framed it in my hallway, right next to the original blueprint of my home's security system. But my favorite moment came a week later. I was walking past the neighborhood park when I saw Lindsay sitting alone on a bench, a soft breeze tugging at her sweater. She looked peaceful. I sat next to her, and for a while we said nothing. Then she turned to me and said, "You know, for a long time I hated my last name. I felt like I had to carry her weight." "You don't," I said. She smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. "Now I know. Now I'm building something different. Not to erase her, but to grow past her." I nodded. That's what healing looks like. Epilogue. Karen was eventually found unfit for independent living. Her mental health evaluation cited years of untreated trauma and obsessive control behavior. She was moved to a long-term care facility where she no longer had access to communication with her former communities. No one celebrated, but no one cried either. Her old house was sold, renovated, and eventually a young couple with a toddler moved in. They planted sunflowers, put a tiny tire swing on the front tree, and laughed freely. And as for me, I I still live in the same house, same lock, same system, but the real security now, it's community. It's knowing your neighbors have your back. It's building something honest and watching it grow. I walk around now with a kind of peace I didn't think was possible when this all began. Not every story needs a happy ending, but some deserve a just one. What about you? Have you ever faced someone who abused their power? How did you respond? Did it change you? Tell me your story in the comments. Let's talk about what justice, accountability, and healing mean together.